Well, welcome everybody. It's really good to see you again. Thank you for listening. As ever, we are back in
Yep.
conversation with Mark and Jenny. And as you can see, Jenny is not home. Jenny, do you want to say hello?
Hello. Hello. Yeah, I'm not at home. I am here in the office at Holy Trinity.
So normally when we record this, I can hear an echo because I can hear, and I saw Jenny can do the same with me, sort of hear an echo of us speaking and then through the Zoom call about half a second later. But today, no.
Just
Here
you
in
and
the
me.
wonderful vestry at Holy Trinity.
It's beautiful. I've kind of angled it so you can't see all the mess.
I mean, your notice board looks interesting, but apart from that, it's fine. Mine, you just don't, because I'm not doing it from my office at church, it looks like I'm in a prison cell. So, because I have bars on the window, which is just to keep me in, really. Anyway, enough of that. Enough of that. Welcome back, everybody. Good to be with you. This week is Remembrance Sunday. So, we're going to, I guess, thinking about that, we've got a passage from Mark 1 to look at. I'm intrigued to know what Jenny's going to do with it in terms of Remembrance Sunday, because that's what I'm trying to get my head around. But have you got a remembrance thing going on there?
I have got a remembrance thing. It's fairly low key here at Holy Trinity. But then on Armistice Day, we have Queensgate School coming in, which is quite a big thing. So I am hoping to have a talk I can use for both, or kind of just tweak for the next one. So
Fantastic. Okay, so it's not a low key thing. It's a Margaret's. It's very much a major key thing. We have the leader of the council. We have the deputy lieutenant. Normally we would have the mayor, but the mayor is going to Dagenham this year because there's a special passing out parade of something at Dagenham. I'm not quite sure what.
We've been ditched.
We've been ditched. The mayor has ditched us. Yeah.
No.
Anyway, we will still have the deputy lieutenant. We will still be starting at 10 o'clock at Barking Park, where I will be anyway, where we have an event at the memorial, and then we parade down through the town, and we arrive at St Margaret's by 11:15, and then obviously start service at 11:15 in order to meet the 2 minute silence. So
I'm a little bit jealous. You know, I like a lot of ceremony.
yeah, you like a bit of that, don't you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really quite stressful. As long as I think it was last year I managed to absolutely nail it. So you want the last note of the last post is to be dying away as it goes, as your watch goes 58, 59, 11 o'clock.
Does your
Yes.
clock chime? Does your clock?
Yeah, it does sometimes. It's not always very,
Sometimes.
but that doesn't matter. I'm going by my watch, so I want to be, anyway. So
No, it used to just be really obvious at Warsaw if you didn't hit it because the clock chimed.
it is bad. When I was at St Mary's Bletchley, where I was associate minister, there was the clock chimed, and every time, and so you knew you were late to start the service because the clock was going, and oh my word. Anyway, we are digressing somewhat. So it's Remembrance, and the lectionary has set us for Remembrance a passage from Mark chapter 1, verses 14 to 20. So shall we have a read through that and then see what on earth we're going to do with it?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, let's do that.
I
So
read it.
I'm going to do the screen share. Do you want to read it?
I can read it.
There we go. There's a screen share. So 14 to 20. Oh, yeah. So we're just a little bit down from there, aren't we? There we go. I'll have a slurp of my tea while you're reading it.
Okay. Now, after John was arrested, Jesus came to Galilee, proclaiming the good news of God and saying, "The time is fulfilled and the kingdom of God has come near. Repent and believe in the good news." As Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. As he went a little farther, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, who were in the boat mending the nets. Immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him.
Okay.
So a bit weird, eh? How are you going to tell
Well,
what?
it's a great passage. And, if it was a regular Sunday, I'm sure we'd be having a different conversation than I imagine the one we're about to have, because what I've been thinking about all day is, okay, why have the lectionary compilers chosen this reading for Remembrance Day, and what are we going to do with it? So,
Okay. So I have done a little bit of reading online, not and there is somebody said that so fishing for men and I had never noticed it, is fishing for death. Because when you fish die as they come out the water.
Ooh. Well, it's certainly not
Ooh.
great news for the fish, is it? It's not great for the fish.
No, so I kind of followed that a little bit because I had never noticed that, and I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. Um, but and I'm going to have to click to the commentary to read it, because there is something from Ched Myers. Do you know Ched Myers, Finding the Strong Man?
I haven't read it, but I know of it. I know you've got a copy of it.
It's on the bookshelf, yeah, over there.
Excellent.
It is very socio-political. He basically says that the whole of Mark's gospel is political rather than as we read
Okay.
it. But he said, let me read it out for you. Let me see who the commentary is by first, because that would be better, wouldn't it? Osvaldo Vino, whoever that is. Okay. As I say, it's online. And he says, Ched Myers, in his book Binding the Strongman, has alerted us to the fact that the metaphor of fishing is taken from Jeremiah 16:16, and I've looked it up, where it is used to symbolize God's disapproval of Israel. It's also used in Amos 4:2 and Ezekiel 29:4, where catching fish with hooks is used to represent the divine judgment upon the rich and the powerful, respectively. Jesus, Myers concludes, is inviting common folk to join him in his struggle to overturn the existing order of power and privilege. And this is quite a different interpretation from the one I received in my youth. Now, Ched Myers is a little bit about that. It's all about power to the people.
Okay.
Goes on to say, I would like to suggest that the purpose of Jesus' call to discipleship is not to take people out of a hostile world, promising them a better life in God's heavenly kingdom. Instead, his purpose is to change the world in such a way that it will cease to be the hostile place it is, so that God's reign can be established on earth. And doing this will require that we make a preferential option for the poor, the dispossessed, the excluded, and those because of gender, sexual orientation, race, or class have been rendered invisible in our society. It will require that we courageously denounce the evils of our Western culture and its arrogant project of globalization. But in short, it will change the romantic view of discipleship that we have inherited for one that, by addressing the socio-political realities of our world, may do more justice to Jesus's original intent.
Okay, great. Thanks. I'll just read that out at St. Margaret's on Sunday, and all will be well.
Yeah, it's
And you can have good luck reading that at O'Hain Trinity, because I'm sure that's going to go over well for you.
oh, it's going to go down really well. But I think we could tie that into remembrance a little bit more.
So the thing that's coming to my mind,
call for justice would be tied.
yeah. So the thing that's coming to my mind, and I can't remember who said it. So what's the thing about the Lord bids us come and die? Something like that, isn't it? Is that?
Sorry, what?
I have to Google it now. Okay, yeah, I thought you'd look like knowing because I thought it was a famous quote, but the call to discipleship is to come and die. There is some kind of quote like that, and if anyone listens who knows these things, they're probably going to be screaming at the. They're going to be screaming at the screen. I'm just going to bring my browser up. I'm just Googling. Okay, so this is how current this is if you're listening. Okay, because you're obviously looking. Jesus bids us come and die. There we are. Okay, who said that? Bonhoeffer. Yeah, okay, I thought it was.
Okay,
and I didn't want to say Bonhoeffer because I thought I might be wrong and people would be going like, haha, but I thought that's who I had in mind.
That's quite different from Nicky Gumbel, isn't it?
It is, though. The cross is laid on every Christian. The first Christ suffering, which every man must experience, is the call to abandon the attachments of this world. It is that dying of the old man, which is the result of his encounter with Christ. As we embark upon discipleship, we surrender ourselves to Christ in union with his death. Oh, okay, sorry, I've just had a pop-up come in front of me. We give over our lives to death. Thus it begins. The cross is not the terrible end to an otherwise God-fearing and happy life, but it meets us at the beginning of our communion with Christ. When Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, Bonhoeffer is always an interesting person to quote in the context of remembrance because, for those of you who don't know, Bonhoeffer was the leader of the Confessing Church in Nazi Germany in the end was executed by the Nazis in fairly near the end of the war. I think in 45, early 45, was part of the Valkyrie plot to assassinate Hitler. So interesting from a pacifism point of view as well. He wasn't, he was. So yeah, really interesting. That's definitely worth mulling over, I think, in terms of this, because I suppose what I was thinking about the call, and the call that people who went to war followed. They followed a call,
But
and in
they
many
didn't
ways
follow the call
also
of God, did they? They were, conscripted. They had to go.
I'm not saying that I'm not necessarily trying to make completely that connection, though others do. I am trying to make the connection that they did follow a call. Well, some were conscripted. Of course, there's all those stories at the start of the First World War, isn't there? And probably at the second as well. But people, joyfully signing up and going to war. And people, of course, still today in our armed services today are not conscripted. They
No,
do.
no.
They follow a call to go. So yeah, I don't know quite what I'm doing with that, other than playing around with it in my head. And I think that's an interesting couple of
No, I
connections
think I'm
you
going to
make.
follow. I mean, as I say, Myers is always a little bit political, but I like the idea of it being about justice. Justice. I think he overplays it a little bit for the preferential of the poor, preferential option for the poor.
How do you see that connection? So what's the connection with that, with the call of to be fishers of men or fishers of people? Because they're
I'm
going to
not
die.
sure. I mean, I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, so what's Myers saying it is? Sorry, just try and run that without reading the whole quote again. What do you think Myers is saying it is?
So Myers is saying, I need to go and have another look though. Hang on. You say without reading it again, but it was quite wordy.
Sorry, folks, we'll just be.
Yeah, sorry, just
That's all
reading.
right. I'll provide the incidental
Okay,
music.
so yeah, so he connected it to where fishing was used as a metaphor in Jeremiah and Amos and Ezekiel, and every time where fishing was used there, it was to represent divine judgment upon the rich and the powerful. So the metaphor for fishing is not quite as warm and fluffy as perhaps we have always thought. You do have to dig into it a bit more to try and actually have a look. So if you read the quotes,
There is an interesting connection here, isn't there? Then I'm just trying to see, and I'm not quite sure where I'm going to go with this, but I think I can see a connection that's forming around the call. Yeah, the interesting thing there, the call to be fishers of men is in one sense to give up our lives, to lay down our lives.
Yeah.
In one sense, to invite others to lay down their lives, because as you say, it's definitely not great news for the fish. And I think, therefore, you are asking people to make the connection there between those who have undoubtedly made that sacrifice of laying down their lives in order that we might be able to have the life that we enjoy now.
Okay.
And clearly, that's not to say we don't have questions about about war, and that's not to no way is that to glorify war, but it is to salute the courage of those who did follow that call, I think, and actually to notice the horrors of war, isn't it? I mean, we were reading. It's interesting. We read a poem, and we've got this book, A Poem a Night, haven't we? And we quite often read a poem. And we had one of the war poets, last night. It was absolutely, Wilfred Owen, wasn't it? Absolutely kind of nailing that, really.
Yeah, it was grim, wasn't it? But
yeah, really grim, but really interesting. And I might even dig it out for Sunday. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, that sort of connection. And then the challenge then for each of us is, what are we doing with our lives? Isn't it? What are we called to do? Where are we laying our lives down? I don't know. That's where I've got to from this conversation. But that's, as I say, I hadn't really thought.
yeah, that's interesting. I mean, well, I guess we've never really spoken about that, about how you end a Remembrance Day sermon. Do you actually tie it into today's life? What are you doing with your life? What are you doing with your life? That
What
sort
are
of
you doing?
Yes. Are you wasting your life?
It is that. I suppose, for all of us, there is that thing about we don't live for ourselves alone. And those who have followed the call to serving the armed forces and paid the ultimate sacrifice for that, both in the Great Wars and in war since. I guess there's a sense in which you don't do that for yourself alone, do you? And we don't live for ourselves alone as followers of Christ.
Yeah, my question really is whether you tidy up your sermon at the end or whether you just leave it hanging. And I never know best
In
way.
what sense would you leave it hanging?
Well, just that we are remembering. So do we have to tidy it up with like, well, what does that mean for us today? What are you going to do? Or do we just remember? Is that enough?
Um, I think that's an interesting question. It seems to me, what are we? You could argue in that case, what are we? Does remembering need to be for anything? Is it an end in itself? And maybe it is. But is there not some sort of? Doesn't remembering also to have some sort of purpose? I'm remembering for this reason, so that I can commit myself to make the world a more peaceful, better place, so that this doesn't have to happen again. Of course, it is happening again. It's happening all over the world right now. People are in the Middle East and in Ukraine, in Sudan,
I'm
in other.
just wondering whether it's more powerful to let that speak for itself. Um, I don't know. I need to go and have a look back at what I've done before as
I guess you
well.
could pose the question, couldn't you? I mean, it comes after the 2 minute silence in our service. We haven't got time to do a sermon before we get to 11 o'clock.
No, mine's afterwards. Mine's definitely because
But
we
I
start
guess
the actual remembrance at 10:50. So
I guess it's an interesting question that I probably need to reflect on over the next few days when I come to write something up. But I think that it is, yeah. Is it an end in itself? Does remembering have some? And in many ways, I think it is. There is an end in itself in remembrance. Does remembrance also need to have some kind of, I'm remembering so that I can commit myself? And of course, that's what the liturgy does, actually. The liturgy ends with an act of commitment, doesn't it? So you could sort of,
yeah, and I think standing in silence for 2 minutes is quite powerful. So I sometimes wonder whether we just tidy it too much. I mean, I sometimes wonder whether we need a homily at all, really. Do we need to say anything? It's if you leave it to do it's stuff.
well, yes, that's true. Although I'm probably going to have 150 people in church on Sunday. I think I wouldn't be doing my role correctly if I didn't say something. But it's true, we need to be mindful of the fact that we can certainly say too much.
Mm.
I think that's absolutely a fair point. And I don't know what you think of remembrance. I never find remembrance particularly easy. Come from is it right to go to war? All those sort of questions. But I also take the point. I don't think remembrance is the time to do that. I mean, perhaps I don't. That's chicking out a little bit because I don't necessarily do it anywhere else. But remembrance isn't the time to do that. I don't think remembrance is the
No,
time
no.
to remember. These people have paid this ultimate sacrifice. There is no question that we do have the life we live. We owe it to those who have made it possible. We need to balance that with a sort of glorification of war, but I think we can do that. But we should remember. I think that's true.
Yeah, I think sometimes the easiest way, particularly if you've got a civic ceremony like that, is if you can find stories, just read people's stories because it makes personal. I mean, it was easier when I lived in a community where people had relatives that were in the armed forces because then it was easy to find stories. It was easy for people to actually get up and say it, and I think that's far more powerful.
Yes, and I remember. I don't know if you were around then, but when I was in Mansfield and in Ladybrook, they actually commissioned. It was a sort of private. There was a member of the armed forces that died in Afghanistan, but not in action.
Oh yes,
And
yeah.
he died of I don't know, it wasn't a heart attack, but he died from natural causes, but while he was serving overseas. And actually, that was quite difficult for the family because there was nothing that wasn't sort of marked, and actually it was it was quite hard because the armed services weren't really that interested. So they
No,
created
he
this.
died in
They
action.
created this. They created a cenotaph essentially in Ladybrook for those to remember those who have who have died like that. And I'm just even talking about it, I'm getting goosebumps because there were hundreds of people there. It was really moving. It was one of the most moving things I've ever done. And I remember there, so I think I was mentioning this to you the other day, but I remember there talking to a soldier who'd served in Afghanistan and who had PTSD. I mean, and he was just in a mess. Just in a total
Yes, and I've heard stories, yeah, mainly people who've come back from Afghanistan because we were there at about that sort of time as well, weren't we?
Yeah,
But
and of course that sort of Mansfield area where we were, and
mm,
that's a kind of there's quite a lot of people that are serving in the armed forces there. And we know people ourselves, don't we? Who did and
yeah,
who did tours of duty in Afghanistan. And of course it was much, that was really, the moment. We're not doing that, so much, but of course it might well come back again.
yes.
And I think, I think the whole thing, the Ukraine war actually has kind of it's kind of made me think. I mean, I was at Greenbelt. There was a journalist there, a Guardian journalist, speaking about the war in Ukraine and the suffering of the Ukrainian people. And, he said himself, I'm from a left wing sort of position. I've kind of, but we got to fight, because,
Yeah, there is certainly like fighting for justice, I think, is a reason to fight.
yeah.
I just think it's really hard to talk about it, and the best way is if we can find people with real stories. But unfortunately, we don't really move in those circles at the moment, do we?
No,
But
not as much as we did. No,
no.
that's true. And there may well be people that some Irish that I'm not aware of, or in the Barking area that I'm not aware of, but no, not as much as we did. I think when we were in the East Midlands, I think that's probably true.
Yeah. Oh
Well,
well, see
there
what
we
we can.
are. Remembrance Day is nearly upon us, and that's as ever actually been really helpful because it always gets me thinking. And if anyone's recording this and listening to our recording, I hope you find it interesting. So do come along as ever this Sunday. If you're in the Barking area, you need to be there early, 10:45. We will be starting, and you're starting when?
We're starting at 11:15 as well.
Okay, so we're both starting at 11:15. That's obviously to make sure that we can get to the 2-minute silence at 11 o'clock. So thank you so much again for listening. We will get this posted and we will be back again next week, I'm sure.
We will.
And have a good week. Hopefully, maybe see some of you on Sunday.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Bye.